Hello everybody, this is General Yanis, and today in Death Card Tactics I will be looking at the new Mortarion with looking at his damage and a
Hello,
special
testing,
focus on
testing.
his durability, and I will be looking at is he unkillable or broken. So let's get started. So today, the 12th of February, it's 20 days past release date and counting, and still no codex for me. I hope you guys are getting your codex. So I was upset about the codex not being here. So now I don't know if you can hear the difference, but I've invested in some better microphone equipment. So hopefully some of you have been complaining about the audio quality. So I hope this one will improve the experience listening to the channel. So a big special thanks, especially to my patrons for their support. So let's in this video we will be reviewing the new Mortarion with a focus on durability. I will start with a quick overview of his stats. I will be looking at what gives the best damage in melee, a viscerating blow, or his ripping scythe profile with a silence, and then in shooting, what is better, the lantern pistol or the phosphex bombs, which of course require a bit shorter range. Then I will just have a brief comparison of his damage with other death card units to set him in perspective of damage per points. Then we'll be looking at the warlord traits that he can select and the psychic powers that would fit Mortarion, and then with a special focus on his durability and trying to answer the question, is he unkillable? So here we will see what Eradicators and units that can cause mortal wounds can do. So let's take a look. So starting with our new Mortarion, the base stats and abilities. I've gone through this before when Games Workshop gave us his full views. I will not spend so much detail here. His abilities are the Primarch of the death card. It's quite important for him. So in the command phase, he can select a core or a character unit to get full rerolls to hit, and typically this would be good on himself to because then he's normally hitting on 2+ and rerolling ones. He should be able to make all his very high damage attacks count, basically. The Lord of the Death card aura is for core Death card units rerolling ones to hit. Not very helpful if he's running by himself and assaulting the enemy by himself, and not many, let's say, core units can keep up with the 12-inch flying Mortarion. He has the Toxic Presence, which means his contagions are always 9-inch range, which is really good already from the beginning. So he's able to debuff the enemy with at least 2 contagions. He has the -1 toughness per default, and he can select one from the Plaguecompanies as he wishes. He must be our warlord if we have him in the army, and he has 3 warlord traits: the Revolting Resilience, giving him 5+ feel no pain, which is really good, increasing his durability, and also giving him some defense from, for example, mortal wounds that the rest of our army now is lacking in. He has the Arch Contaminator trait for rerolls of plague weapons, but it doesn't benefit himself, and it's only for core units, and not many core units, as I said, can keep up with him on the battlefield. So even if he's escorted by some fast demon engines, those demon engines would not benefit from Arch Contaminator. He has the Living Plague trait, and this is quite good because enemies within 3 inches cannot benefit from their own units, from their own army aura. So if there is some captain giving some units reroll ones to hit, if the unit that is within 3 inches of Mortarion cannot benefit, for example, from their captain nearby, or some other abilities that they would be able to reroll or get better, let's say invul saves or whatever, feel no pain auras or something like this. And then his ability Host of Plagues, he can select an additional warlord trait from the plague companies before the first battle round. So basically you don't have to decide until you've seen the army and the mission and everything, and then you can select some plague company warlord trait, basically a contagion to bring in battle. He knows 3 psychic powers from the contagion discipline. He can cast 2 powers and deny 3 powers every turn. So starting looking at his melee weapons, he has basically the silence with 2 profiles. So here we can see how he's silencing the enemy. Now I know where the weapon gets its name. Here I assume the -1 toughness aura in effect, and that he has given himself reroll once from the Primarch rule. And this is just the average damage he expects to do and not point corrected. So here we can see the blue is the eviscerating blow, where he has the unbracketed 7 attacks with D3 plus 3 wounds. He can do massive damage against all basically every target. Here we can see, for example, a unit like Eradicators or Aggressors. He can be doing 20 damage on average here. With some other, like some big vehicles and tanks and so on, he can be doing, with no invul saves, can be doing over 30 wounds with eviscerating blow. So the eviscerating profile always deals the most damage, except for targets that have only 1 wound. For example, here we see Tau warriors or guardsmen or something like this, some 1 wound opponents, because a lot of the damage from the strong eviscerating profile is lost there. So in this case, it's better to take the orange line to select the reaping scythe, where you get 3 times the number of attacks but less damage each. But those are good against any wound 1 enemy. So massive damage outputs, as I said, for example, 20 wounds expected on an Eradicator. So bye-bye this unit, and bye-bye, for example, Gilliman, which I've covered in a fictive battle. So basically, Mortarion can kill very tough targets in melee. If he can come close by, he can basically exterminate whatever he's facing, more or less. And then at the bottom here is the gray line. It's the attendants, claws, and teeth. That he has D6 attacks with some Nurglings, and basically I don't even know if anyone remembers to use them. But if you have anything left after Mortarion's attack, maybe they could do a little bit, but basically I don't know if they are just there for some comic relief. If we look at his ranged options, here I'm assuming that the -1 toughness aura is in effect. Because he probably is quite close to the enemy in this example, and his contagion is already 9-inch, and he gives himself reroll once. And here I'm comparing the pistol. The lantern is the blue damage, and the orange is the 2d6 phosphex grenade bombs that he has. And we can see if we are close enough, if we are within 6 inches of the enemy, the phosphex bombs do better damage versus most targets, especially, of course, weaker targets where they can have multiple attacks, or targets that have invul save and you just need to overwhelm them with some attacks. However, the lantern pistol is quite interesting in that if you can trace the lantern through several units, if you can shoot a unit further back, then you draw a line, and everything that goes through this line, every unit, also if you hit, all those will have a separate wound roll, so you could be causing damage to multiple units. So if you are able to do this, then the lantern should be preferable. If you can shoot, let's say, across 2 or 3 units, you would be able to be doing more damage than just the blue. You would be doing better. So the thing with the ranged options is that it's not plague weapons. Unfortunately, if you really need to kill some enemy with these weapons and you need the rerolls, you could use the cyclic corrosion stratagem from some other unit. For example, a Plaguebear Crawler with a mortar, corroding the target, and then also his shooting weapons, Mortarion shooting weapons against that unit would count as plague weapons, rerolling once, so you would be more certain of getting the kill, let's say. And of course, he can use the lantern if he's caught in engagement range. But most of the times he will be clearing the enemies, and then he will be quite free to advance, to go forward and charge another unit. So just briefly comparing his damage in points. So what we saw before was the damage uncorrected, the total damage he can do for the 490 points. If we look here, we have some tables summarizing the average damage across all the targets I've been simulating. And here we have the baseline damage with no additional buffs except for -1 toughness for melee damage. Mortarion in this case has the reroll once to hit because it's his own ability. He can use it. So if we look at the melee where he can do a lot, if we count the 490 points, so per 100 points, he's doing, let's say, good, but average good damage in melee. He's not the best melee damage output per 100 points. So he's dealing huge amount of melee, and he can typically take out any threat, but at 490 points, he isn't the most point efficient damage dealer, but he definitely has the highest intimidation factor of all Death Guard units. And of course, there is something scary about bringing the Primarch for the enemy. And of course, his short range output is not super high. I mean, he has some grenades or a pistol, so it's more like, yeah, he can do something in the shooting phase, but he's definitely a melee damage type of character. So if we look briefly at the Plaguecompany warlord traits that he can select before the battle starts, there are three that I think are most interesting to take for Mortarion. The Mortarion's Anvil Gloaming Bloat. This is quite good. So enemy units within his contagion range cannot overwatch, they cannot set to defend or reroll hit and wound rolls. So this can be really good for Mortarion charging in and shutting down rerolls if he can charge in a castle of the enemy, and also while he's charging, and if he's wounded and he has very little wounds left, he can still do tons of damage even if he's bracketed, and you want to avoid overwatch, then this can be really helpful. So very good ability for Mortarion to have on top of the other three warlord traits he has. Then the ferryman with the droning, this is quite interesting. So the enemy within contagion range at the start of his movement phase halves the movement characteristic for the rest of the turn. This can be quite good again. If you can put a lot of enemy units within this influence, then when they try to get away from Mortarion, maybe they will be suffering. They will be moving less, but they can still advance and use the full advanced dice roll. If they are engaged with Mortarion and want to fall back, they will be able to fall back only very little, and then they cannot maybe escape his contagions, and yeah, they will be suffering from this. So this can also be interesting for Mortarion. Then the Harbingers, the Shamble Rod, this is a way to give mortal wounds at the start of the opponent's movement phase. And this could, you are basically adding mortal wound rolls on a 4+ for every unit within 9 inches. And I think Mortarion would feel like the old days where he was doing a lot of mortal wounds on top of his melee damage. So worth considering. I think there are the other 4 are less interesting for Mortarion himself. There are some that are debuffing the enemy and then can help our own units, but I think these 3 here are a better fit for Mortarion. And then if we look at the psychic powers, he can select 3 from the Contagion Discipline, and I think the most interesting for Mortarion is Miasma of Pestilence, giving -1 to hit, and I think this is an auto include for Mortarion, because I think Mortarion cannot be protected or bodyguarded in any other way, and he's such a big model that he's very difficult to hide, and he will be drawing the attention of heavy weapons fire from the enemy most probably, and -1 to hit will really increase his durability by 33%. So I think this is a very good, this is probably an auto include to take Miasma Pestilence from Mortarion. Gift of Plagues is also very interesting in a warp charge of 6. You add 6 inch to the unit that you cast it on's contagion range to a maximum 12 inch, and this is potentially good on himself, and then he would increase his contagion range to 12 inches, and that would be put more of the enemy in contagion, for example, not allowing units to overshoot even if they are a 12 inch or rerolls, for example. And he can be shutting down rerolls in a wider area or putting -1 toughness in a wider area, preventing, for example, Eradicators coming in at half range and using rerolls while shooting with a higher damage. So Gift of Plagues also quite interesting to cast on himself. And then Curse of the Leper, I think, is a very interesting and good offensive psychic power that we have now. So the closest enemy within 18 inches, you roll 7 dice, and each one above the enemy toughness deals 1 mortal wound. And this is a very good offensive spell because it's good against infantry, and it's very good for any enemies, especially if they are suffering against the minus toughness contagion. So if you take something like intercessors or some other toughness 4 units, within the contagion range, the toughness is 3, and basically you have 7 dice with a 4 plus dealing mortal wounds. So that's 3.5 mortal wounds on average. So this is quite good for against infantry. Somewhat interesting is the gift of contagion. An enemy unit gets lower strength, and if the work charge is above 8, the enemy is also getting -1 attack. Okay, so switching over to Mortarion's durability. So in this table, I'm looking at the shots that are needed to kill him, and this is not point corrected. So these are the typical weapons I use to analyze the durability of different units. And here we see how many shots he can take of each weapon. So, for example, bolt rifle shots, he is needed to take. He needed to be shot with 486 bolt rifle shots before killed on average. So you can see some incredibly high numbers here for the mostly light arms and anti-personnel type of weaponry. And even the very heavy weaponry, he can take quite a lot of shots because he has the 4 plus invul, he has the -1 to the incoming damage, and he has the 5 plus feel no pain, and he has toughness 8. So he's really a tough character to take down. Even if we look at something like an entropy cannon, we need 35 shots or 65 shots with a melta gun, or 37 shots at melta at half range to take him down on average. So first, let's conclude that Mortarion is an absolute beast to take down, nearly being immune to light arms fire, and only heavy weapons are really a threat to him. And if we additionally cast Miasma of Pestilence on himself, or let's say he's a psychic and cast it on himself, he can take 33% more shots on average. Normally these weapons hit on 3 plus, and then they will be hitting on 4 plus. So, however, you cannot have this from the get-go if you don't go first. Maybe your opponent will have the opportunity to shoot Mortarion before he gets the ability to cast, and it could be also denied, that he could be failed. But if you can put Miasma of Pestilence on him, you increase the durability even further. With a 5 plus feel no pain, he also has some protection from mortal wounds, unlike the rest of our army now, and he can deny psychic powers 3 times, so this also can help him be more durable against psychic powers. But we have to be careful about enemy abilities that shut down or ignore invul saves. So, for example, Null Zone from Space Marine Librarian, for example, and then, for example, if Terminators or some heavy, hard-hitting units charge Mortarion, and they can quite do a lot of damage if he cannot save with his invul save. So if we have here is Mortarion with no invul save, and you can see he can take nearly almost half the amount of shots and attacks from different targets, but still he can take quite a lot. But he's not as immune if something does that he bypasses his invul save. Death Hex from the Chaos Space Marines, or other Chaos shutting down his invul save and then being shot at. The Nightbringer I will come back to, but I've already made the video. Basically, Nightbringer from the Necrons is basically an anti-Mortarion weapon, so he's basically ignoring the invul save of Mortarion and also the feel no pain. No, but of course, when we have this type of 4 plus invul save, so we are in a 50-50, let's say all or nothing type of role, saving or missing a save. And when we have a damage that is also random, like D6, you can be looking at, even if the average is okay, you could be unlucky and maybe you miss your saves, and maybe the other one rolls a couple of 6s, and then suddenly at least you have Mortarion bracketed. So I will also be looking a little bit more on some simulations to see what is the variability of these numbers, because here it looks like he's basically impossible to kill. But let's first, before we do the simulations, let's look at how he compares the durability per point to some other death card units. So here we compare the number of shots, but now I've corrected to the 100 point cost. So of course, Mortarion per 100 points, let's say in a theoretical durability, how many wounds you put on the table. You have these values, and if I take the total average of all the weapons and compare him to the Blight Lords, the Plaguebearer Scroller, the Plague Marine, a 30 Bloodrunner, a Demon Prince, just for some units to compare, we see that actually even per points, even costing 500 points, he's almost as durable as the Plaguebearer Scroller and the Blightlord Terminators that are so far have analyzed the most durable units per point. So really a very durable unit, and because he's such a tough target, is very difficult to take down. So does this mean that Mortarion is unkillable and broken? So I would assume that many opponents we face and many army lists might simply lack the tools and the firepower to take him out. So if you have a lot of light guardsmen or whatever, and if an opponent doesn't have many heavy weapons, they basically cannot kill Mortarions. So if this is the case, I would expect, let's say, a good and clear thinking opponent to realize this and try to ignore Mortarion. Basically, it's very difficult to ignore Mortarion. He's fast, he can come into your face, and he can be really intimidating on the board. But I've also seen some battle reports, for example, Crimson's Fist facing Death Guard, and the Crimson Fist player played very well, ignoring Mortarion, and basically Mortarion never got to come and charge, and basically the Crimson Fist they killed off the rest of the Death Guard army before Mortarion could do anything. But of course, if the enemy is intimidated by Mortarion, then you could be winning the game just for this. But with clever placement and tactics from the opponent's side, I mean, Mortarion could basically he can kill anything almost if he comes into melee with that unit, but he can basically only take out one unit per turn if the opponent is playing smartly. But of course, he can also affect more of the enemy with his contagions. One other thing is that maybe the opponent cannot take him out, but if they can at least do half the number of wounds, they can try to reduce his threat and give Mortarion a lower movement. But some army lists that we are facing could have the tools to take him out. And what would that require? What would it require to really take him out with a dedicated list and a dedicated effort? So one thing, of course, that comes to mind is Space Marines, and here I'm thinking about, of course, the Eradicators and supporting characters for the Eradicators, and Meltas, especially at half range, are dangerous weapons for Mortarion. And Eradicators are basically a very cheap way to throw out a lot of Melta shots. So I'm analyzing some cases here where I have 3x5 Eradicators. They don't have any other buffs, and they are a 24-inch range shooting at Mortarion. This is, of course, a hefty cost of 670 points for the Space Marine army. If we also have these Eradicators, the same squad, but now we have one squad fully buffed, for example, re-rolling ones and getting +1 to hit and +1 to wound with a Master Chaplain or a Captain or some other characters giving them buffs. So this again would require, of course, a bit more supporting units, but of course the Space Marines also need to have some HQ characters here. And then if we really look at the anti-Mortarion type of configuration where we have a lot of Eradicators, but now they are equipped with heavy Melta rifles, which do D6 +2 damage on the default and D6 +4 damage at half range. And where the captains have multi-melta, so the captain will be shooting 4 shots, 4 melta shots. So this would be 765 points. So it's quite a lot, of course, but this could be really threatening Mortarion. And even if this sounds like a big investment, and people will say yes, but you're spending a lot of your points for this. My biggest concern with this and the Eradicators in the Space Marine army is that I don't see that this as any downside for a Space Marine player that is playing against Death Guard. I mean, it's not like these units only can shoot Mortarion and then they have no point in being on the battlefield. Basically, these same units, they would wreak havoc on all our other units, apart from maybe poxwalkers that that basically are okay. The opponent would be wasting his shots against poxwalkers, but it would be taking out blight lords and furtive blow drones and everything else. We would be pushing upfield. These eradicators would be able to shoot down. So this is my biggest problem with these eradicators. There is basically no downside in taking them, not that I can see at least. If opponent goes first, which is a 50% chance, they should be able to get one round of fire to Mortarion before Mortarion has any chance to cast Miasma of Pestilence on himself. And even in this case, I mean, if they shoot at Mortarion from the longest distance, Mortarion will not be able to engage them from his turn 1, and maybe only from turn 2 he will come there. So they will be able to shoot at him 2 times before he comes to the enemy lines if they play carefully. If Mortarion goes first, he can fly forward as much as possible, but then the enemy also might be able to get one round of fire at very close range before Mortarion gets into contact with them in the second turn. Because I mostly assume that Mortarion is not very able to hide on the battlefield and stay out of sight in the first round. So here are the simulations of these Eradicators shooting at Mortarion at 24 inch. I'm assuming here no Miasma of Pestilence. I've done 1,000 simulations, and here we are seeing the 3x5 Eradicators. The average damage they can do, even these 15 Eradicators shooting 30 Melta shots, the average is only 9 wounds on Mortarion. If one unit is buffed, so this means a lot, so then they can do 13 on average. And if we have this very dedicated squad, maybe Ultramarines, and they can move and fire these weapons without penalty and so on, they would be able to do 16 wounds on average. And what we can see here is that this is, as I said, we have a 50-50 to save on the involts, and we have d6 plus something and d6 damage, so it can be a lot of variability. And here you can see, out of all these 1,000 simulations, the wounds taken for Mortarion. So you can see that even with these 15 Eradicators, there is quite a good chance that they only can score, let's say, five wounds on Mortarion, for example. But they have. Here we can see what is the chance that the Eradicators, in how many of these 1,000 simulations do they bring him down the first bracket. Then it's almost half the chance, but they only have 4% chance out of the 1,000 simulations. Only 40 times did they take Mortarion, killed him fully, but it could happen. When one unit is buffed, they had 80% chance to take him to the first bracket, 50% chance to take him to the second bracket, where he only can move 8 inch, and 20% chance to kill him. And with the heavy Meltas and the multi-Melta, they had a 37% chance to outright kill him. So even with this amount of firepower, there is a high chance of Mortarion surviving this, but a high probability that he will be bracketed and slowed down from the opponent. But he would most probably not survive 2 rounds of shooting. So it's quite important to go first, or we could also consider putting Mortarion in strategic reserves. And at half range, he would be getting much more damage. So here I just did the same numbers for 12 inch shooting. If we have Miasma of Pestilence, it's quite important. So instead of 9 wounds on average, we get 7 wounds on average. Instead of 13, 10, and instead of 16, we get 12 here. And the chance to kill Mortarion in 1 turn is greatly lowered. Some other threats that come to mind, and maybe mortal wounds, which he's not he still has a 5+ Fall Pain, but he doesn't have any invul save and so on. For example, Fulgurit Electro Priests from Adeptus Mechanicus, 20 of them at 340 points need to come in melee. These guys are scoring D3 mortal wounds on a 6-2 wound, and I did the calculation here, but with 1 round of fighting they get 40 attacks. The average damage they can do is 8. There is only a little chance that he can be killed in one turn with one attack here, but they can do some damage. They can bracket him. Maybe if they have more units shooting and at like rowboats and things like that, they can weaken him. And then if he comes close, these electro priests can do a lot of damage. So of course, if we have the chance, we should use the other part of the army, like Plagueburst crawlers or other units, to try to weaken all these units that can be a threat to Mortarion as he plows his way forward. Some psychers can be dangerous for Mortarion. For example, the other Chaos Primarchs, Magnus the Red, can be a difficult adversary. He can cast his psychic powers with +2, and he does d6 mortal wounds on a normal smite, and these 2d6 mortal wounds basically on a 2+, because he gets 10 plus the 2. And it's very difficult for Mortarion to deny, because Magnus has the +2 to his psychic, and he can reroll once in the psychic test. So I made the simulation, so it's only at 50% chance that Magnus is stopped from casting the smite, or he fails. And then if Magnus also can cast Death Hex on Mortarion, succeeding also with a very high chance, Mortarion will be struggling to deny. And then he also has good melee ability, and maybe the other units can shoot at Mortarion while he's under the Death Hex. So of course Mortarion is not immune to all the psychic shenanigans and a lot of shooting and a lot of sustained fire from every angle, but especially if somebody can take out his invul saves. And then, of course, the almost Nightbringer from the Necrons, he could be called Anti-Mortarion. So basically, he's really an Anti-Mortarion torpedo, bypassing invul saves and feel no pain in melee. So it's very important, if you are facing Nightbringer, not to charge your Mortarion headlessly against the side where Nightbringer is. Try to weaken him and kill him off with your other units before he comes close to Mortarion. And I already did a one-on-one simulation between Nightbringer and Mortarion. At that point, I didn't know that Mortarion had a 5+ feel no pain, but basically it wouldn't help him so much against the Nightbringer. Yes, he could defend a little bit more the psychic powers, but again, the Nightbringer, with a little bit of lucky rolls, can kill Mortarion or severely wound him in one round of melee if he can come close and do these attacks. So finally, how do we best use Mortarion? Mortarion is a high value, high damage unit, and for the points you put on the table, I believe, in my opinion, you should put him into good use. So in optimal situation, you should try to deal a lot of melee damage and cripple the enemy with the contagions that he can have as fast as possible. And utilize Mortarion's intimidation factor, giving time, basically, as you could also see him like a huge distraction. So giving time to the rest of your army to gain objectives, push the opponent back, and win the game for you, even if Mortarion is killed after making hopefully a lot of damage and crippling the opponent. So in my opinion, Mortarion should be played aggressively, flying up towards the opponent, and I can't really see any point in holding him back. Just holding him back in our lines and to buff something, it doesn't make sense. I think it's the best way is just sending him up there and trying as quickly as possible to engage and make damage. I don't think either there is much to be gained in escorting him with anything. It's not like he can be protected by bodyguards or something like this that he could before. Not many units are as fast as Mortarion with 12 inches, and if they are fast, like Blight drones or Blow drones, they don't benefit from Mortarion's auras. They are not core, so I can't see any big point that he should be following a battle group up the table. Maybe something we can think about is teleporting Terminators, Death Shroud, or Blight Lords strategically in turn 2 after Mortarion has come up, and maybe making really a Mortarion's anvil and smashing the opponent between the Terminators and Mortarion if possible. But many times the opponent can lock out the sides for the Terminators to deep strike and trap them. So other alternative to this is to keep Mortarion strategic reserves, but I think he gives you most value already from the table. And even if the opponent let's say if you put him on the table, even if he's lost, even if the whole enemy has been shooting at him and maybe they bring him a really lot down, he maybe will take 1 or 2 rounds of the whole opponent army shooting at him, and that would give you time for the rest of your units to hopefully win you the battle. So some summary and final thoughts. Mortarion, our great demon Primarch, seems to be playable again, and I've seen also some of these reports now that he has also been winning tournaments, people winning tournaments with Mortarion in the list. So that's really encouraging. He has, of course, the potential for incredibly high damage output in melee, and basically can take most units out in the game in 1 round of melee fighting. I think it's best to use the rerolls of hit to himself to avoid losing many high-value attacks. It's no, I mean, if you can kill outright expensive opponents, you shouldn't be missing on ones without any reroll, in my opinion. The Viscerating Blow is the best profile option for the scythe. Apart from 1 wound targets, then use the Reaping Scythe. The freedom to pick additional contagion before the battle is nice and can be used strategically to further hamper the opponent by preventing rerolls or giving mortal wounds or slowing them down. Miasma of Pestilence as a psychic power, I think, is an auto-include. It will increase his durability a lot. And then Gift of Plagues to enhance his contagions. Maybe Curse of the Leper as something extra aggressive he can cast. I think those 3 are the best psychic powers for him. He's extremely durable and very tough to kill and incredibly intimidating for the opponents. He's not immune to heavy weapons and psychic spams, for example, and watch out especially for some invalidating abilities where they take out Mortarion's invul save. This happens to me. This happened to me in my first game. He still miraculously survived with a lot of feel no pains, but being shot by Eradicators. But it wasn't pleasant to lose the the ability to have some invul saves. And shooting will now most probably not kill him in turn 1, but he can of course be slowed and bracketed. And many army lists will not have the tools to deal with him. I think probably he can be ignored, and some good opponents can think around Mortarion, but I think a lot of people will be very distracted by Mortarion. In any case, I think it's important to understand that he alone cannot win the whole battle for you. So be sure to follow up with the rest of your army, the Plaguebear Scrollers, the Voted Bloodrones, the Terminators, the Plague Marines, the Poxwalkers, whatever we have. Let's make good use of them, as Mortarion is putting out a hell of a show against the opponent. So what are your thoughts of Mortarion, and what is your experience so far with Mortarion in this list? Leave some comments, and yeah, will you be considering taking Mortarion in your lists? And if you like this video, please press like and leave some comments and subscribe to the channel, supporting the channel to grow. I really appreciate all your support. If you want to support even further, please visit my Patreon page, where I will be posting some extra material, and we have some discussions of the roadmap and what videos to have next there. And yeah, and let me know if the audio now is better. And with these words, General Yanis is signing out. Stay safe out there, and bye-bye.